I think I was terrified that I didn't want to hear really what was going on.
Yeah.
Like I didn't want to hear what stage, I didn't want to hear any of that. And I think the first time I overheard something, it just terrified me. I just kind of wanted to stay oblivious to some extent. Um, and my dad, he just looked stressed and scared. And I just remember him telling me it was really bad. There were just different times where people would just be like, it's really bad. She has cancer all over. She was on pretty intense pain meds. And, I was just there to really just make sure she felt like someone was there and she wasn't by herself.
Welcome to Black Cancer. I'm your host, Jodi-Ann. In this episode, photographer Erin Douglas shares a perspective we don't often get to hear from when it comes to cancer narratives: the caregiver. Specifically, the family member who reprioritizes their lives so they can put the needs of their loved one first. That's what Erin did for her mother, who is recovering from a recent second instance of cancer. Between living at the hospital and staying by her side at home, Erin hadn't slept in her own bed for 6 months. This episode means a lot to me. More than ever, I've thought intentionally about my family and friends who showed up for me for thankless, glamorous work. The real work, the work we need to heal, the work we need as people of color to ensure that we have the strongest advocates literally by our sides, fighting for our health and for our lives. For all those who helped me, thank you. And I'm so grateful to Erin for sharing this story. There is one thing Erin did keep going when she was staying at the hospital: the Black Burner Project. Check out Erin's Burning Man photography on Instagram. Here's my conversation with Erin. I do want to start by sharing something that I recently realized that's particular to our relationship and our conversation about cancer.
Mm-hmm.
You and I have known each other for many, many years. And during our last check-in a few months ago, I learned for the first time that you had been supporting your mom through her cancer journey and hoping, that I was showing up and listening to that. But I was so blown away at the same time with how much your journey as a caregiver for your mom felt so similar to my own experience, or we were able to talk about very similar things, even though we're coming to our respective cancer journeys with really different experiences or really different roles, I'll say.
Right.
And so that was around the time that I was thinking about starting a project like this. And it was specifically because of our conversation that I wanted to interview people who had any type of relationship to cancer in any way.
Mm-hmm.
And not just someone who was diagnosed, because it was our conversation that revealed to me that the cancer journey doesn't just belong to the person who has the diagnosis.
Yeah.
That one diagnosis is actually the story for like 10 plus people.
Right.
I don't know if I would have come to that realization without our conversation.
Really?
Yeah. And I'm afraid to say that because if this podcast ever makes any money, I feel like I owe you a percentage.
It's okay. I'm sure we will have other ways of the favor being returned. I have some things in mind. It's like, I'm just joking.
Yeah, actually, now that you say that. But yeah, I at least wanted to share that because I've been on this kick of what makes this project so unique, what makes it so different. And at least the feedback that I'm getting from people who've been listening to it, that's always the hook, right? Of, oh my God, I'm seeing maybe the people in my life differently and thinking about like, how did this impact them?
Right.
Or understanding your own experience differently around how other people are sharing their story. So I just wanted to say that and thank you for that.
I'm glad we were able to catch up when we did, but I think it's also just this idea that me as a caretaker, I have very few opportunities to speak completely candidly and openly and with comfort, I guess, without having to like truly explain everything, because there's not as many, you just, in your inner circle, you don't have that many people who have been caretakers, I feel like, on the normal. So I would say thanks for seeing that and wanting to share those stories, because the caretaker role, at least from my perspective, feels like something that most people don't understand. People who are caretakers just don't really get not that we're looking for recognition, but the recognition in the overall major role that someone is taking, and the energy and the work and everything that it is. I think it's just often overlooked. There's no book, there's no, I mean, maybe there is, but there's not something that's just a known thing out there for caretakers, and usually it's something that's not planned and it's very sudden. And so for those who have taken on that role, I just give them so much, like praise and blessings and just kudos, because it's major.
It's intentionally an invisible position in some
Mm-hmm.
things, right? Because
Oh.
the person who's experiencing the health crisis, and in this case, battling cancer, everyone is there because of this person's condition.
Mm-hmm.
And so even you as the person who's helping, you're just there to like help that person, to help your mom. And so no one's really supposed to pay attention to you, right?
Right.
But there are people who are professionals, like this is their job, this is their
Mm-hmm.
profession. And I still find that people who take on that role professionally is also like this invisible, thankless position. And I mean, at least for me, having gone through this, I just look at, nurses, medical assistants, caretakers. I have a lot of aunts in my family who are at home caregivers for other people professionally, and just like, oh my God, that is such a big, critical, important role.
Mm-hmm.
People that we love the most would not be where they are without these people.
Right. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So before we get into a bit about, your mom's diagnosis and your relationship to that, I'm wondering if you could just share a bit about kind of what your relationship was like with your mom before the diagnosis and what was going on in your life at the time.
Yeah, I would say I had moved back home to live with my family to just get some clarity, to kind of figure out some things in regards to what I want to do. Having lived in New York for 15 years, hadn't planned on being here for as long as I was or am. And I would say me and my mom have a always wish it was closer kind of relationship for me, and there were just some things that were always holding me back from it. I know it just has to do with her journey and her experience with her mom, which was just kind of estranged, and some other traumatic things that we've had to go through with losing people and how that have impacted her and us. But I would say that we, there's a lot of similarities. She's a creative. She's a teacher. Everyone loves my mom. She's a great cook. But there was always this yearning for some type of deeper connection that I was unable to really be able to figure out how to come from it from my side, just because I hadn't learned it. And they live in the suburbs. It was kind of hard to adjust moving back home to a place where I grew up, and felt like a lot of people I was interacting with, I would say kind of couldn't relate to. A lot of people had stayed here, and, so it was hard to find a community out here. So it was that was where I was, but I was building my business as a photographer, and I actually had just committed to spearheading my photography career and doing it full time that year. So that was, what was it, 2019 or the end of 2018? I was picking up on jobs and events and clients and things like that. And so she basically had two different cancer scenarios, but the one we're going to more specifically speak about is the last one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Your photography, I will say, is just outstanding. Your eye and your vision and your work is just so clear and it's so good. And honestly, if anyone out there, Lord Jesus, wants to marry me, please, I will hire you, girl.
Oh my gosh, someone does. I'm saying the same thing.
But yes, please look us up and just, hit us up in the inbox.
I don't mind one of those. Yeah.
So how did you hear about your mom's diagnosis?
So originally she was diagnosed and she went through a round of chemo, and she, was successful in the sense that they were like, oh, I'm pretty sure they were like cancer-free, everything's good. So that was 2018. And she was still able to work, do everything that she normally was. She was still having chemo, going to work. So other than taking her to her chemo sessions, it wasn't much more required of me the first time. And then she started to get this pain in her leg that just intensified. And I remember coming back from Burning Man, and then I had a conference in Memphis and assumed that her pain was gone, and learned that she was still in excruciating pain, and she had a doctor's appointment, which then led her to go to the hospital instead. And she didn't come back home from there, and with this pain, I kept saying, like, they kept saying it was one thing, and they kept saying this and that, and, oh, it's probably from the chemo because of this. And what it was that there were little cancer cells that they didn't pick up on, and it had spread and it had gone into her bones. And so there was a tumor in her leg, and that was what it was giving her so much pain, but it was all over the place. Because the pain was so excruciating, they kept her, and we were in the hospital for a month. We were there for a month straight. She didn't see the outside. I saw it, every now and then. And it kind of like the role just kind of, there was really no, this is what's going to happen. I just started to go and stay in the hospital with her.
So were you there did you take her to the hospital?
My dad did.
So did he call you and tell you, like, how did that go down?
Since they were just going to go to the doctors, I wasn't going. My mom and my dad was with her going to the doctors. But that was it. So he called and just said, we're going to the hospital instead. And I kind of just waited and there was some time, I think, in the emergency room. So I just kind of waited for an update. And then I just went in there, I think. And we had no clue what was really going to happen, but she was just in a lot of pain. Yeah. So eventually they admitted her, and we had no clue what the future held for us for months, months ahead of time. Yeah.
So when did it sink in for you that, crap, my mom's going through cancer again, and maybe this time it's more serious than the last time?
Honestly, I think I was terrified that I didn't want to hear really what was going on.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't want to hear what stage. I didn't want to hear any of that. And I think the first time I overheard something, it just terrified me. I just kind of wanted to stay oblivious to some extent. So, and my dad, he just looked stressed and scared. And I just remember him telling me it was really bad at one point, and they do the rounds, and they talk about the situation, and some of them go a little bit deeper, and some say things, and I was just like, I couldn't handle hearing them say, like, all the things that were going on. And there were just different times where people would just be like, it's really bad, she has cancer all over, all this different stuff. And she was on pretty intense pain meds. And, I was just there to really just make sure she felt like someone was there.
Yeah.
And she wasn't by herself. And especially after it was, a week, it's like, okay, I don't know how long this is going to be, but, just seeing her in pain, it was so painful, that it was just, she couldn't even stay still almost. It was so painful. It was hard to see her like that, but I also didn't want her to be by herself within, having to deal with the pain.
Yeah. I think that's an element of being hospitalized. I think a lot of people don't understand that you're in a hospital that is filled with hundreds or thousands of people. Your doctors, like you're saying, they do rounds.
Mm-hmm.
So you just get them for a moment, but there's still a lot of, I don't want to say downtime, because if you're in a hospital, you're not like hanging out.
Right.
But you don't have someone who's just with you all the time.
Right.
And there are times when you're sleeping, you wake up, you're in pain, and there could be no one there.
Mm-hmm.
As someone who has been in the hospital and had someone also who is just always there, it's such a relief.
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't really get to see people that
Right.
Even every day your nurses are different. You're always meeting new people. And so I don't think people get that.
No, I mean, besides becoming their advocate, because you are learning everything, and not only are you learning what the nurses and the doctors are saying, but because you are there, sometimes I didn't go home or leave 24 hours. You're learning everything about whoever it is you're taking care, my mom in this instance. I knew how she should be turned. I knew what was going to hurt. I knew when something was off with her pain meds. I knew that something wasn't right here. And I was giving them my perspective on what I thought was going on. So many instances that happened. I wasn't a professional, but having watched her and knowing different things, and just you're kind of like problem solving in your head, and there's so many different roles you take on top of it, as like in terms of skills and figuring things out, that you become so much more than someone who's able to help them to the bathroom when a nurse can't get in there.
Mm-hmm.
You're able to tell them something's not right, especially when there's been a shift change, and the new nurse may have a completely different perspective of what she is capable of doing or what she should do. I had a nurse who told me, "Oh no, she can't walk," and I'm like, "Yes, she can." Why? How are you going to tell me what she can do? Yes, she can. But if I wasn't there, she would have sat, and she wouldn't have taken that first step to, strengthen her legs. And, that was a different nurse, but another nurse might have said something else, or, so it's so many roles in one, um, and that doesn't account for all those things that you're doing, plus not sleeping.
I mean, can you recount a particular instance where, upon looking at it now, you're just like, damn, I'm glad I was there?
Oh my goodness. I mean, so many. So many, because I do know that if it wasn't for me, she lost her mobility because she had been in the bed for so long and not able to walk because of the pain. Her legs got so weak that she couldn't do anything. So she needed help to get on the commode. She couldn't walk to the bathroom, so we needed a bedside commode. I, was doing makeshift things with the pads so that I can wrap it so it didn't hurt her legs. And I was teaching them how to wrap it and make it more comfortable for her. And, so I was like, there were so many instances where she would have had to wait for who knows how long to go to the bathroom or to get off of the commode, something that was causing her additional pain because it was pressure on her leg, which was in pain. Or, moments where I realized somebody skipped us and didn't bring us anything to eat. And, or her needing her sheets changed because she couldn't go up, and sometimes she lost some ability to, like, know she needed to go to the bathroom. I was even turning her over myself sometimes. And then I would consistently get certain nurses that would say, in terms of reliability, you aren't able to do this and this and that. Understandable. But I wouldn't need to if someone was here. If it's going to take you 45 minutes to come here to help her to the bathroom, which then means that maybe she went to the bathroom, which is going to take you another 40 minutes to come back and get all the stuff to change her, I'm going to do it. And if you don't want me to, then you need to get here.
Yeah.
Like, I have no problem not doing this. I really don't. It's hard to lift a full grown person, no matter how much weight she lost. It was still like, so, I think there were just so many instances that I was there to like advocate or to say like, something isn't right. Could it possibly be this? Or, it just so every day,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, even just listening to you recount the types of things that what makes caregiving and being hospitalized unsexy and hard to talk about, because it's already about the things that we don't like talking about, like getting to the bathroom, turning her and just taking care of our bodily needs. I think for people who've never been hospitalized, just think, particularly as you're taking in a lot of fluids and you're taking a lot of medication, which makes it hard to poop and all that kind of stuff.
Oh
Just think of like every single time you have to get up and go to the bathroom becomes a 3-person operation.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the things that you do, not only is at least in my situation, trying to get her to go to the bathroom, putting on go to the poop meditation music, like to move your bowels, like bowel meditation, and like I would drip water. I would put water in a basin and I would get a washcloth and just like let the water drip and squeeze the water to make her like have to go to the bathroom. Like, do you understand? And this would be 2:30, 3 a.m. in the morning, so many things, and then, when it comes to constipation, it's hard. And so it's like, you have to help. And when I say all the ways, I mean, all the ways, like the things you don't even think about, you're helping a grown person. You become creative, but I also know that if I wasn't there, I really don't know what would have happened, because I don't think they don't have the time to get creative and to sit there and to massage her back and put on meditation music and to, when it's coming and it's not going anywhere, to help her and to, so I don't know. I just don't know. And then, the longer you don't move your bowels, then that also affects other things that they can or can't do, other things you can or can't get, you can get. Those things just have to happen. And they're there to be like, okay, when's the last time you did this? When's the last time you went to the bathroom? And I couldn't imagine what she was going through as someone who was independent. She also needed assistance in every area of it from someone else.
Yeah, I can feel demeaning. I don't know if that's the right word, but especially as an adult, you have such a strong sense of independence. And when you have to rely on people for the most intimate parts of your day, and then that person is a family member who doesn't see you this way, right? Is now so involved in seeing every square inch of you, right? Supporting you, right? And I remember the first time I had to get naked in front of my little sister, I just felt a lot of shame. And then when I got discharged, my eldest sister had to help me into the shower every night. And I cried every single night. It was just I just felt so, like that was the sign that I had lost my independence when I couldn't even get to the bathroom myself. But then I think, at least for me, after a while when I was in the hospital, I was just like, whatever. I would have friends come and visit while they were, giving me a sponge bath. I'm like, it's fine. I don't care. Everyone looks at me every single day. And so I can only imagine, like, if I was feeling that way in like a sister-sister scenario, what the heck did that feel like for you? Is like, this is your mother.
I gave her kudos, but I felt like there was that same transition where I don't know if she was actually comfortable, but it seemed like she was more comfortable at some point, just being like, hey, everybody's seen me at this point, so it was nothing. Even now I think now she's making more like, it's just that I'm like, man, kudos to you for, I mean, I know you have no option, but
Yeah.
just all of you,
Mm-hmm.
and having to just let people see you. And it's not always, me. Yes, it was different because we're not the family where you're walking around in your bra and your underwear and like super covered all the time. It's
Yeah.
just like, we're just not that intimate like that. But in the hospital, it's like, it's even still, it's not always a female.
Yep.
They're male nurses that have to, change you or come in. And there were instances where she might have felt a little bit uncomfortable. And I think it was more because the nurses who happened to be male that she was experiencing just seemed a little less, just seemed a little bit more rough
Mm.
and not able to really connect on how to go about things. And it was hard to know where that was coming from. And so I think that just made her more uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so there were definitely at least one scenario where I was like, look, my mom doesn't feel comfortable with this particular male nurse. I need you to send someone else. But it was definitely him as a nurse. And I don't remember the scenario in particular, but I just remember him just kind of not getting it and being super rough, and always like, she always found herself saying ow, or
Mm-hmm.
this and that. And so I just had to go and tell the head nurse, like, I need someone else.
I need you to shut this down.
Yeah. Like, giving him too many opportunities, he hasn't figured it out. So
Yeah.
but yeah, it definitely, I feel like, to fast forward, even when she got home and had help from aunts and stuff, and having to go to the bathroom in front of people, I think that's one thing, especially to sit there and have to go to the bathroom and, far beyond peeing, like that. I couldn't imagine, having that mindset of just letting yourself be able to do it and not feel some kind of way. But at some point it definitely seemed like she was used to it. I'll have to ask her how it actually felt. I don't think she'll just go and squat in front of anybody right now just because she got used to it.
Yeah, almost when you start like, oh, excuse me, covering yourself up, you realize that you're in a different mindset. Like, oh yeah, remember those days when I would just take a shit in front of anybody? And
Right.
yeah, I find it weird. Like my sister accidentally came into the bathroom when I was changing. I was like, oh my God. And I'm like, wait, the same sister 2 years ago took like she's
Yeah.
seeing everything. Like, what is that?
Some serious stuff. Yeah.
I know. I wonder, the unsexiness of this part of it, if that is connected to what you had mentioned to me before around, which I thought was just so profound and has not left me since, when you said that caretaking and taking care of someone are really different. So I'm wondering if you could say a little bit more about that distinction between caretaking and taking care of somebody.
Well, I think anytime you have someone who is not in regards to being a healthy person. So I'm not talking about like pregnancy and like far beyond, delivering a child and the things that women have to go through. That's its own thing. But I think when the challenges of like, and I'm not a mother, and neither, I haven't had a child, but the challenges of taking care of someone who is healthy versus someone who is not healthy, and especially when they're older and adult size, there is just a difference, one, mentally, because the challenge isn't a challenge that brings joy in moments. Like, you're just unsure and scared every day. Unsure and scared because there's the potential of losing this person, or, there is the potential of things never getting better. And so I just think that because there is no like moments of joy other than maybe just like we got through the day and there's another day. I think that's the difference. And then also there's no like, you know, my mom is a grown adult, so she could talk back. There was no, lifting her up and patting her on the back and putting her in time. It's like I had to endure a grown person who was in pain, being hurtful, and also, just there's so many intricacies the of the role of a caretaker that they just don't get better. You don't see it with light at the end of the tunnel, and there's also like no support. There's no book on it. There's nobody calling you and saying congratulations, or, let's have a meetup and bring all of our, there's no support really. Sometimes it's too much to even be able to talk about. And I think it's just this level of mortem, like being super scared, and having to pick up on something that oftentimes you have no one to call and relate to. There's, rarely a friend that can give you advice on this. And in my situation, I was every night waking up several times a night, but also having to put a 100 and something pound woman on a commode from a bed by myself, and putting her back on there and pulling her up on the bed. And, like, it's just ultimately, I just think it has so much to do with the mental, emotional side of it. And me coming from having to take care of an adult, I think anytime you have someone who's not healthy, that you're taking care of, just set you so far apart from taking care of someone who's healthy, and it's just the challenges of navigating that.
I think that's a really interesting parallel of parents.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just like, oh my God, I made a person. And yes, it's difficult to take care of this person, and the sleepless nights, and, the unsexy tasks of parenting an infant, especially. But, I've had friends of mine who are first-time parents who call me and ask for advice. I mean, I've been an aunt since I was 13, and so I have a lot of baby exposure.
Right.
And there's just so many different types of people that you can talk to about people in your own family, people who have kids, people who don't have kids but have experience, or there's more of a normalization for parents to talk about what that caretaking, or taking care of, in this case, like your child. And then maybe the sense of responsibility, like, it's my child. That's my role as the parent. I take care of this child.
Right.
But caretaking, there's not a lot of people to talk to about it, like you say. And in a lot of instances, because, this is your mom, particularly at this point in your life, it's not really your quote unquote responsibility. Like, it's not your role to do these things for your parents, especially at this age. I think all of us have this sense of, one day I'll have to wipe my parents' ass, but not today. But
Yeah.
No, it's today.
Yeah. And I think part of it is there is no planning and there's no excitement about finding out that you have to be a caretaker. You take on the role sometimes because there's no one else who stepped up to the plate, and even people within your, close family circle might not even be supportive, just because it's such a traumatic, either you find out of something, whether, someone was born into being unhealthy and they are just someone that they have to be a caretaker for from the beginning, or you were thrown into this new scenario that was tragic and traumatic, and there is no like light about finding out about that you have to take care of a human differently than it would be just regular, and
Yeah.
it's also this idea of like, okay, this is my mom and we usually just have conversations, and right now she can't even, walk. She's not cognizant the same way. I have to speak for her. She's not eating. She's not understanding this. And she's also speaking out of pain and hurt. So she can be hurtful. And so yeah, it's just so, it's such a job that, that you just aren't prepared for, and you just, yeah.
And it's cancer, right? The thing that everyone is scared of getting, the thing that people spend so much time trying to avoid. That's
Mm-hmm.
the thing you're trying to support this person with. And so you have compassion, but sometimes they're assholes. I mean,
Yeah.
recently I asked my
Oh
sister,
my gosh,
or I
yes.
made a comment like, oh, like in my mind, I handled it very well. I remember
Mhm.
making jokes and stuff in the hospital and like doing all these fun games or whatever. And my sister's like, you were a pain. And like from her perspective, the amount of emotional work that she had to do to say she's going through a lot right now,
Right.
not showing up as her best self, and
Mhm.
having to kind of silently in her own thankless job to swallow ways that I was being, let's say, unpleasant.
Right. Yes, I experienced many unpleasant, and I had to sit back because it hurt.
Mm-hmm.
I had to, have talks with myself and say like, don't take it personal, but also allow myself to be like, oh my gosh, I'm doing so much, and she's hurt my feelings. Like, geez,
Yeah.
um, and she probably had no clue. I mean, actually, there was a time that she fought me, like in the hospital.
Like she started swinging at you.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Uh, and it had to do with the pain meds and them like adjusting things and not taking in account of other, like how it would respond, how she would respond to it. And I mean, so many things. I always tell her, I'm like, you remember, you be like, you fought me in the hospital, right? She's like, yeah, you told me. And having to deal with that, like I can't just go and plop her in timeout because she, hit me. It's like something.
After that, you made sure you came to the hospital greased up with some Vaseline just in case she decided to swing at you again.
And you have all these like inner thoughts. You're just like, oh my gosh, I had to, deal with that. And, like it's just not a lot of knowledge or misconception of what caretaking is. And so I think some people are, to them, it just might be like giving someone meds. And maybe that is for someone. But if someone's like really deep in as a caretaker, be super sensitive about what you assume that they're doing or not doing or how hard it is, because not only have they become almost parent-like in a matter of a day without having like the inner hormones just like make you this super mom, like there's nothing that just like 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 there's nothing that is like, not only that, but they are figuring it out by themselves, having to go, having to stand up and go against medical professionals. And like I said, doing things that just that they're just creative. Let's just say that, creative and not cute.
Yeah. So, what changed for you in your own life after you essentially like moved into the hospital?
Oh my gosh. I would say the only time I went home was really I would try to go to the gym, but I couldn't concentrate. So I was just like, I just want to go sit in the sauna. Like that was the only thing I wanted, was just a little time away and something that was going to make me feel cozy or something. I don't know. Um, but like I mentioned, it was the first time I had solely focused on my photography career. And I had picked up on a pretty good client that I was getting, doing events for consistently. And I had, a good number of things on my calendar, and everything just seemed to be canceled or drop randomly. And then it just seemed like nobody was reaching out. So it seemed like it, which was good in a sense because I didn't have to say no to opportunities. But then it was also like, oh my gosh, I was just kind of on a roll, and now there's nothing. And then obviously that still means that I'm not making any money. And I think I might have had two, almost like just two gigs that I was glad to be able to leave the hospital and go to. But I think that was the biggest thing. It was just like my social life, I didn't have one until I think there was a moment where I just went crazy and was just like, I need to go out. But, even then I was leaving at like 11 p.m. to go out and just get some social time. So no social time. I didn't see anyone. I rarely talked to any of my friends. I think the only friend I spoke to was a friend who had been a caretaker in her life with her mom. And I eventually had to let people know, like, I am not okay. And it's really hard for me to be open and express my feelings, to even some of my closest friends. I had to just say in text, like, just let you know I'm not okay. But I can't, I don't have the capacity to answer any questions. Like, please don't ask me any questions. And so it was kind of like having those moments too, where I had to tell people, like, I can't rehash what I just went through this today alone just for you to gain nothing. I mean, like, you're not really going to be able to, like, what are you going to do with this information other than have it and maybe talk about it to somebody else? I don't know.
Yeah.
So it wasn't important enough for me to rehash, this emotional day I was going through or week or whatever, for someone to understand how traumatic it was. And so, yeah, so I think it was just so many things, work and social life. And I really don't know how many hours I actually got to sleep in a matter of, 4 months. It was not a lot. And then on top of that, I didn't sleep in a bed from October to, I don't even know, March, maybe April. There might have been one time I slept on my bed, maybe during the day, where I finally was like, I need a bed to take a nap in. But in terms of bedtime, I didn't sleep in a bed. I don't know if I was numb. I don't know if I recognized how it was affecting me really. Like, I knew I was tired, but I also recognized that I'm still able to do things and do whatever I need to do in crazy, intense situations. I can function. Maybe I don't realize it's not 100%, but I can still function pretty well, not having slept and having to take care of someone and having to do all the things. I can function pretty well.
You're like a supercharged person. Like, it's so interesting because you're both mentally, emotionally, physically drained from this process. And I want to circle back on this thing, right? Of not sleeping in the bed for 6 months. That when you have someone who's a caretaker that's also in the hospital with the patient, there's no separate bed. There's no ward in the hospital for family members who needs to sleep there 24/7. Like, you are in a chair or across a couple chairs,
Yeah,
for an extended period of time. Like, as you're drained, you're also, I guess, finding out new parts of yourself in all this capacity that you had to take on so much. I mean, what do you think about yourself having looking back? I mean, it's not even that far back, but looking back on the hospital experience and your transitioned role in caretaking at home.
it's funny because I always have had this level of like lack of confidence, I think. And I still struggle with that now that I'm out of it. There was a moment where I stood up after having picked up my mom out the bed by myself. And I'm like, I wasn't even going to the gym. That was the gym.
Wow.
And I remember saying like, I can do anything. Like I
Mm.
could do anything. Like I felt like Superwoman because I was like, if I can figure this out, and not only that, but be able to function, and because essentially caretaking is trying to bring somebody back to the healthiest part of them. And like, even if something is inevitable or you don't know where it's going to go, like in your mind, you're doing everything you can do to hopefully make them better. You're hoping that like when they wake up, maybe there's something new that they can do, or maybe there's something. So like you're trying to make them healthier as a non, medical professional. So I'm like, and I don't know if I saw it like that until later people told me that it was because of me. They said that like I saved her, or they said that like, you brought her health back, or they just said it in ways that made me be like, oh wow, but there was a moment where I said I can do anything. To me, I just didn't understand how I wasn't able to translate that over into other areas of my life that I've struggled with, like career, or walking out there and thinking I'm the ish, snatching up a beautiful man or whatever it is.
Yes.
Like I don't know why I haven't been able to, and it's still a struggle. So I have to go back to that moment a lot of times and remind myself of what I was able to do. Yeah. So I think that that was probably the biggest kind of epiphany in the 6 months of seeing myself
Mm.
differently.
Yeah. When you told me about the photography that you did for the March on Washington,
Hmm.
when I saw those photos and when you told me how hot it was and just kind of all this stuff that was going on, like, did you think back to that moment, or how did you think about your capacity in enduring the mental, physical, and emotional strain of shooting for the March on Washington?
To circle back, so my mom went into the hospital, I believe, the end of September 2019 or October. She was there for a month. So I think total, I was probably living in the hospital with her for 2 months total. She went to rehab. She wound up getting an infection, and her last hospital stay was in January through the New Year's, through her birthday. And so basically, we saw some progress in her at the last hospital stay. So I think a lot of it had to do with an infection that she had that they didn't notice before. So bringing her back, because there was the hospital stay of taking care of her and then the home stay of taking care of her, which was super intense, things started to look better and she started to gain some strength by the time February came. So I was just starting to get out, and then and just starting to like right, emerge and be like, okay, I can go out, or I can start possibly looking into work, taking some time. We had a home care nurse, so taking some time to go to the library and work. And then COVID happened. And so I basically have been quarantined since October and had to go back inside the house.
As
The only thing
soon as
I
you're coming out, the whole government is just like, nah, girl, you got to go back.
got to go back in. So it was really, really rough. And so as a photographer, I was like, I hadn't really shot anything, for all of those months, and I think I was not thinking about documenting it because I was the caretaker. Maybe if I wasn't the caretaker, maybe there were moments I would have, you know. Um, so when it came to, by the time the March on Washington happened, there was one other march that I went to, but it was a really hard decision because as a caretaker, you are making your decisions during COVID based on the person you are taking care of. And so it was really hard for me to decide whether I wanted to go out or not. But I also knew that I hadn't been shooting and I felt like the need to be out there, and I felt the need to document, and it was stressing me out that I couldn't just make a simple decision. Like I had to think of somebody else. If it was just me living at home, I would have been like, okay, like I'll take this risk, I'll do that, I'll do this. But I had to think of someone else. And so it was it was a tough decision, but I felt like I had to. Like there was just this deep part of me. And I think when it comes to to actually capturing it. Um, Maybe there's a level of detail that I was more aware of now, like having been a caretaker and seeing things. And I mean, as a photographer, even if you're out there having fun and it doesn't feel like work, you're still you're using your mental capacity a lot differently than everyone else because you're searching, and to search and to be aware and to look is mental energy that you're using that you don't even know you are. So I think, I just went out there. I had an amazing photographer, Karsten, who I was with, who I look up to as kind of like a mentor because he takes great photos. And I was able to kind of go out there and learn from him, and then also shoot from the side of me who hadn't been shooting, and had been seeing people taking photos of all of what was going on, and wishing, like I've been like, oh, I want to be that person who's like in the New York Times or Rolling Stone or Time, and hasn't happened yet. But I think I kind of went out there with the idea of like practicing and knowing where I would initially like my work to end up, and kind of, being in the space of like dreaming a little bit bigger. But it's having fallen into this straight into COVID has just been really difficult. So, I've been lucky to, that we've been healthy, but the March in Washington was super intense and draining. And I have to often remind myself that I never recovered from the past 6 months. I never got 6 months worth of rest that I lost. And so even a day of sleep is not going to catch me up with all of what I lost and the trauma that I went through. And so it was great to be out there, and I'm happy with what I got, but it was really tough on me mentally, and it was exhausting. And being out there in that heat with a mask on, with a heavy weight of a camera and lenses and a hat, it took me out. So I'm glad you liked the photos because it took me out.
Oh, I love them. I mean, I just remember scrolling on Instagram and I saw a photo. And I mean, we're in this moment where there are a lot of images from the marches and protests and demonstrations all over the country, all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was just scrolling and I saw this photo, I'm like, Erin?
Mm-hmm.
Is that you, Erin? And then when I looked, I was like, holy hell, Erin is out. Like, Erin is shooting. And just knowing everything that's been going on with your mom, I was just so excited to see you out. And also like, oh shit, Erin's out about in the world. Like, is everything
Which
okay?
is, for me, I consider myself a travel photographer because that's what I'm most passionate about, telling stories of the places that I've been, and encouraging people through my work to hopefully explore and travel. And I haven't been anywhere, and I'm usually someone who travels several times a year. And so DC, I think, is the furthest I've been. I might have taken one trip to New York because I have a dear friend who has been in the caretaker role, who was adamant about making sure I was taking care of myself, and I was not. And so he made me come up and made me spend time with them. And so I think I went to New York once, but I feel like on the regular, I would be up there visiting friends, a lot more than where I've been. So DC, the furthest I've really been in a long time. And because I spent a week in there and had a few friends come from New York. So yeah, I was out. That was out for me. In comparison to a regular normal year of traveling and exploring and things. So yeah.
Yeah, it's good that you had that support of that trip to New York and kind of being forced to take care of yourself. How were you being supported during this time? Was your family there to support you? Do you think,
Well,
like, what part of your work as a caregiver do you think maybe your family didn't see?
I think sometimes people, well, in regards to family, I think some people um, do what they can. My brother has a family. I just don't think he had the capacity of being there as much as he might. I don't know if he felt like he should have been there and just couldn't, or, there were definitely moments where I was like, I need you, and I shouldn't have to explain why I need you right now. But he does have a family, and it depends on if they're supportive of them, leaving and being away. And my father, he was there at the hospital a lot of times. We would switch roles. He just wouldn't stay over because it was, he's older and it was too much on his body to, sleep in a reclining chair that doesn't recline all the way.
Yeah.
He did it once or twice and he's like, I really can't. So I'm not someone who asks for help. So I think if it's a friend who, and this friend who told me to come to New York came from a space of having been a caretaker. He knew, and he explained to me what he did wrong in terms of taking care of himself, and gave me the advice of, you need to work out, you need to do something. So I think if you're a friend who hasn't been through it, I think the key is to try to bring as much normalcy to them versus asking them to questions about it and trying to figure it out. If you're around, to take them to lunch and talk about some other stuff, unless the caretaker brings it up themselves. Or if you're able to do things just to bring some level of normalcy, or having conversations that don't make it emotional or uncomfortable. Because nobody wants to talk about how they had to help their mom do number two, and how intimate that scenario was. If you really want to know about my day, like, no one really wants to go back over that. Or that, their mom just fought them, or they had to, so I think that's what he did. That it wasn't about talking about it. It was, and they would have been a sounding ear if I wanted to talk about it, but it was about going to the movies and spending time, going to dinner, like just normal stuff. And I think that's hard for people to really understand, as a friend, supporter, what angle to come from, unless you've been there, and it's hard to articulate, especially for someone who doesn't ask for help, or to even know what you need, because you're just not thinking about yourself. So I mean, I think my dad was supportive in the sense that when I finally started to be like, I need to get out at night, he would just take over and sleep downstairs on the couch and be like, go. So.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there's two parts of it, right? I'm in this caretaking role for people who are outside of that, who want to support me, not really asking me about it, but I don't know, taking me to go get my nails done, right? Like, treat me like a normal person and give space for me to open up if I do want to talk about anything. Like, that's
Right.
the normalcy that you were talking about. On the flip side, I'm curious if you have any advice for other people who are in caretaking roles right now.
Oh my gosh. I think if you're thrown into it, and I'd say anything I would do differently would be, as much as I wanted to be there and make sure she was okay, then she's only going to be as okay as me. And even though I could function well, I think in her moments of being able to being clear-headed and things like that, she wasn't expecting me to be there. She didn't demand me to be there, and she would have been okay if I didn't show up a night or something. So it really had to do with me. So getting sleep or taking a nap, going to the gym, taking walks, telling your friends that need their support in ways in terms of bringing normalcy, not necessarily bringing it up unless you tell them that's what you need. And I think even for my other friend who had been through it, that's what you find is the difference, is people who've been through it are not going to really ask you about it in regards to well, what did you do? What did you have to do? Or, like, or is, they want to know if she's okay. But if you just found out something horrible, like, oh, to have to speak those words is so traumatizing, if you haven't had the time to accept it yourself, so I would just communicate to your inner circle and outer circles kind of like how you need them to show up. But also, if you do not want people around you, just to let them know. I think when I said, like, I'm not okay, but please don't, please try to refrain from asking me questions. I'll reach out. All those things I think are important, so that they, you just go missing in action, and so, but I agree with my friend, like working out, which I definitely scaled back on, having something that's going to give you some mental, like, rejuvenation, I think, is so important, so there's a lot of things that you do wrong as a caretaker when it comes to yourself, and you're so tired afterwards. So it's really hard to juggle when, it's not about you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, it's not about you, but there's so much about you that shifts.
Right.
And then there's so much about you in your relationship with this person that shifts. I mean, you spent a lot of intimate time with her,
Mm-hmm.
not just in the hospital, but now you're quarantining with her and
Mm-hmm.
supporting her at home during COVID, which who knows when that will shift. And so I'm curious, like how has your relationship with your mom shifted during all this time?
It's funny because I think we're still closer, I think, but I think we were even closer when she relied on me more, more intimate. Like, I think we held hands in the hospital, um, I would just, sleep in the bed with her. And I don't know, I don't remember the conversations we were having, because I don't remember how, like I said, clear-headed she was. But, it's definitely changed since before everything. But she has also changed. So I will say that she's gotten a lot better. She's, more independent. So she doesn't rely on me as much, which has lifted like a huge weight off of my shoulders in terms of, what I had to do every day. But she is definitely, like I see her speaking up more, not caring, or, just, kind of like I said, she's, naked more, or she's, like, she's definitely changed in the sense of, recognizing, I think to some degree, what she went through. I don't think she really understands how bad things were. And I actually recently have been reflecting on it, because I'm like, man, I really haven't done much work in regards to my own self and what I've had to deal with when it comes to caretaking this year. And looking through photos and being like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that's what she looked like and how much weight she lost. And, and I told her, and I was like, I don't know if you know. And she was like, I'd be interested in looking at photos. And, I'll show her, but even though I've seen them several times, it still brings up all those crazy moments. I just have been reflecting on, oh my gosh, I can't believe that's what I was doing on a daily, or I can't believe that day. Oh my gosh, I remember that day, like she had a really bad wound from being, stagnant and laying down. And I became the wound care nurse and having to see a deep, deep wound in an area that's not a cool area to have a wound. I was like, oh my gosh, I had to use a wound vac. And I was like, oh my gosh, I was an expert in everything, I'm rambling now, but I was just going back like, oh my gosh. I'm a wound care nurse. I forgot I was a wound care nurse too.
Watching you, like, I'm looking at your face right now, just kind of reliving it in this sense, because you're not out of it. You're still
Mm-hmm.
kind of in it. And I totally get around, you have your own processing time, like you have your own traumas, and it takes a period to even understand what it means to not just be a witness to someone, a parent who's fighting for their lives, but to be someone who's actively part of, as you say, bringing them back to health and being, alongside them in that fight.
Yeah. 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 I think my parents, they gifted me with some money to be able to take a trip because, just to thank me. They know that if it wasn't for me, they are not sure how things, and that was kind of the first time that I recognized the major role that I had and like how it impacted her health, on top of a few other people who had seen her and now see her, and they're like, Erin, like you really were the significant reason why, like we know that's the case. But because of COVID, I couldn't just run out and go sit on a beach somewhere and reflect and take time for myself. It was like I was cooped up in a room or in a house, and my mom was able to talk now, and I didn't want to be around anyone, but I had to be, so it's like, it's definitely been an interesting time for sure. But I think not having the space to be able to do that. I will say another key thing, even though I'm actively searching for a counselor slash therapist, is for people who are both in the scenario of having to deal with a diagnosis and for a caretaker. I think having the right therapist to have weekly sessions with is important. And I had started therapy right before it got really bad and couldn't keep up with them because I was in the hospital. And there became a point, because I actually was thrown into another caretaking situation during COVID with another family member, that I almost broke. And it was evident. I could feel like the anxiety in my skin. It was really like it was hard to touch my skin. But I also know that was probably just remnants also from my mom. If I hadn't had to deal with my mom, I would probably be able to handle that without having reached that point. But I was already at boiling point from everything, even though I felt okay. And so I think to make sure you jump on starting to see someone early on.
One visual that I've used to describe kind of what you're talking about is, when you overfill a hot cup with like hot coffee or water or tea or what have you, maybe you can sip a little off or you spill a little bit off, but it's still pretty full.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's how I felt. And, how you're describing it is reminding me of that. Like you're already full, your cup is full.
Yeah.
And maybe you've done little things to get it down a little bit, but you don't have that much space, right?
Right.
And so once other things start piling in, then you can get into this overflow situation because you haven't been able to empty the cup a little bit more, right?
Right.
And so
Yeah.
it's just you can just get overwhelmed over overflow,
Right. For
pretty
sure.
quickly and probably quicker than you would have if you didn't already have such a full cup.
Right. Exactly. So it's just being aware of that, and because when you're caretaking, a lot of your everything about you goes out the window. And so when you're able to, and hopefully you're able to start bringing regular normal life things back in, those are already stressors, regardless. You face challenges every day. So if you're already there, and like I said, I was functioning well, but it's still traumatic. It's a trauma based experience that you just adjust to, And so when you figure out how to do it, you just go, you just do it, and you're not really knowing the impact it's having on you.
Do you feel like you were putting some of that energy trying to, I don't even know how to phrase it, like compartmentalizing some of that trauma or trying to express or release some of that stress by working on the Black Burner project?
I think the Black Burner project was probably the only thing that I worked on during that time. So it did bring me a level of like normalcy or being able to work on something myself. Like I definitely put together the entire website in the hospital at night, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. Like that's when I worked on it. And because even there were so many nights where, yeah, I was in a reclining chair, but I couldn't sleep, didn't sleep whatsoever on top of, the nurse having to come in every 2 hours. So I think so. There was a lot that I wasn't able to do because I just didn't have time to focus on anything, which was, it was kind of upsetting because it had gained such huge recognition really shortly after I came back, which was really close to when my mom went into the hospital. So it was like on this whole high after the last Burning Man. And then I kind of had to like halt it, But if I remember correctly, that is basically the only thing that I worked on when I could. And knowing the impact that it was making, and I think getting so many messages from people helped me, out a lot about the work that I was doing, even though I wasn't able to actively do stuff as much as I wanted to. That was when like I was getting a lot from people that was driving me. So that was helpful indeed.
Yeah, I mean, people talk about things being a labor of love, which I think maybe a lot of the caregiving was, if I'm going to project some things onto your experience here. But sometimes the things that we are also working on that people think are so cool and, oh my gosh, that's so great. Like I remember seeing your photos and your article in Essence magazine. And, there are parts of our lives that are also labors of trauma too, like getting all that stuff up. And so if you can share with the listeners what the Burning Man Project is, this labor of love and trauma in some sense of that being your outlet during this time period of following up on the work that you had for it before your mom was hospitalized.
Yeah, so Burning Man, really quickly, if you don't know, is a yearly event that takes place in the desert, except for 2020. But normally it's a yearly event that's been going on for, I don't know, some odds of 25, 30 years, and where about 70 to 80,000 people go convene and live for about a week or more to create a temporary city. They build and create a temporary city that's functioning outside of running water. And they live based off of like 10 principles, including like radical inclusion, self-expression, self-reliance, and it's a powerful experience, I will say, that's not diverse. And I was introduced to it by a friend, and I was very nervous about it. I had never camped. And after my first year, I wasn't sure how I felt about it. I just knew it was an experience and unique. But after so many people reached out to me, not particularly because I was sharing photos of people of color. I think it was because I was a Black woman and they could reach out to me knowing that they didn't know someone who looked like them who went. They all expressed the same thing, that they had heard, they'd known about Burning Man and was interested, but didn't go because they didn't think it was a place for them. They didn't see Black or brown people. They figured it wasn't for us. We don't do it. We weren't welcomed, whatever it might be. So I decided to go back, if everything aligned, the second year and take photos of people of color, and to post and to hopefully have exhibits or maybe a book later. And yeah, and I kind of just built it off of this idea that was very scary for me, because it was just a random idea that I was like, okay, like, why do I have this idea and why is it nudging me within? And what is this going to do? I wasn't really sure how I was going to do it or anything. And it just really grew. Yeah, and only because people have expressed the impact do I know the impact that it's making on encouraging people to be open up to it and to let people know that it is a welcoming space for them. Because Burning Man is such a what they call like a permission engine space where it gives you permission to be yourself and to be creative and to do whatever you feel. Um, I was coming off of that, going into, being a caretaker. And so it was hard to have to give up that time coming off of that energy and knowing the success I had that second year of bringing over 200 burners of color together for a group photo, that never has happened before, and having to kind of like push that to push that aside. But I knew the importance of it for me to keep going too. So I would just use that time at night to, stick to some of the goals I had, like the website, and which I haven't been on in a while, but like the website, and like, trying to keep up with photos. So, you know, um, when my mom finally went to sleep, then I would post something or respond to a message. So yeah, I think that might be the only thing when it comes to passion work that I was able to, dabble in a little bit, which was aligning because although I shoot everything, I'm not extremely passionate about like events. I'm good at it, but it's not something that inspires me and, it's super fulfilling when it comes to taking the photos and then, editing them. So I think it was helpful to have that new content to be able to work with when I was sitting in the hospital.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I would say that checking out your Instagram lives and your incredible, I mean, I cannot express this, incredible photos. I mean, your photos for the Burning Man project are unlike anything I've seen, just visually so striking. And so that would definitely be my recommendation to listeners to check out the Black Burner Project and all your incredible work on that. And so I'm curious for you, I always like to ask my guests for listener recommendations, someone to know, something to read, and something to listen to.
So I did reread The Alchemist just now because I was like, you know what? I really need to go through this journey with this boy because I know, although I read it before and it was aligned in that part of my life as well, it was super something that I needed to read. So if you haven't read it, or if you haven't read it in a long time and you're kind of going through a little, especially doing this now, I would say do that. And someone to know. One, I would say, because we were just talking about Burning Man, Burning Man is a space that you do a lot of inner work without knowing that you're doing inner work. And so, knowing yourself, which I don't think a lot of people get to, and not that you know all of yourself just because you're doing inner work, I think it's a lifelong journey, but I think a lot of us don't even know the main parts of ourselves,
Mhm.
because we're living in a like society that sets these norms for you. And so I say one, get to know yourself, whatever that means, and to be okay with whoever you are. If that means you're different than your friends, then that's what it is. But this year has definitely, even though it's still a daily struggle and challenge for me, it's definitely been eye-opening. And listen to, ooh, I would say I've been listening to Jodi-ann. I think you're doing great work and you're just so smart. And I'm like, oh, I want to be smart like Jodi. So yes, you. And I actually also listen to my friend Robin Arzon. I listened to a talk she had with, I think it's Maker's Woman. And I don't always, I'm not always paying attention to all the talks that she's having with people, but I mean, I was writing notes down and she's just such an inspiration. So if you have a friend or if you don't know Robin, I would say listen to her because she's a badass woman who's doing a lot, and I'm lucky to know her, and glad I have the mental capacity to be able to like separate myself and take notes from someone that I look up to, like real notes in my notebook. And so I would say she's a great person to listen to too.
Yeah, I only listen to her when I'm on my Peloton.
Oh,
She's doing
yeah.
great work there. No, it's so interesting to know someone and admire them and to be able to learn from them. I think it's so important. And I feel that way about you, to sit here with you and learn from you and understand my own experience in new ways. And I think learn more about you and deepen our friendship in new ways. And so I'm just so grateful for you and having you in my life, and having you a part of this project. I mean, who would have thunk it? We met at a gym, taking this hip hop class together, and fast forward, we're sitting here talking about cancer.
I know. Oh my gosh. It's been, yeah, it's crazy to just think about it all. So
Thanks so much, Erin.
thank you, girl.
You too. Black Cancer was created, edited, and produced by me, Jodi-Ann Bury. Thank you so much, Erin, for sharing your story with us. To make sure that other Black cancer stories become center to how we talk about cancer, there's something you can do. Rate, subscribe, leave a review wherever you find your podcasts. You can find us online at blackcancer.co and on Instagram at _black_cancer. Trauma comes with endless wisdom for ourselves and those around us. Tell someone you know about Black cancer.